Nature is still very productive. The site is abandoned, but through the combination of responsible mining, and in the case of the AOC that we'll talk about in a little bit, being able to go off-site and make our fair share and contribution to an ultimate site restoration, we think mining and environmental cleanup can walk hand in hand and be perfectly accommodated under law and policy. So let's scoot to the next slide. So as Laurel said, we needed regulatory certainty under CERCLA. We brought in the agencies early. Ultimately, this is an ability to pay agreement, which is not uncommon under CERCLA. The financial assurance that we worked out with our regulators is $7.5 million of early action. And as Laurel mentioned, this is our good faith down payment because we're all Idahoans. We care about the site and we want the site to behave better environmentally, and we want to leave it better behind after our mining operations have concluded. Next slide. So here's Laurel's quote. I don't want to read from it because she's spoken to this directly. We believe that we approach this site as an innocent third party, but we do so with our hand extended to our regulators in an effort to make a pre-permitting investment to clean up that ultimately won't interfere and in fact will complement our plan of operations down the road. So next slide. So this is really to the heart and soul of this conference today in terms of what are we going to do about abandoned mine lands. The GAO 2020 indicated that part of the problem is what CERCLA may potentially afford as an opportunity. CERCLA limits with respect to its view that it can be enforced on innocent third parties. And thus, the issue of how CERCLA can be applied to abandoned mine lands has not, in fact, it's had just the opposite effect. It probably drives people away from sites that could otherwise be productive. We believe our ASAOC sort of changed the conversation around that. It's not as if there aren't implementation issues that Austin may talk about down the road, but we think this provides an excellent template in terms of dividing responsibility between opportunity, attracting capital investment to an abandoned mine site, and affording the opportunity to put people to work, both from a mining perspective and from a cleanup perspective. Next slide. So I discussed the three CERCLA consent decrees, the last being the Bradley Mining Company decree in 2012. I think, Austin, we could probably hit the next slide. And Austin, I think at this point, given what we know about the functionality of the ASAOC, this is our very important green and red areas of the site. And with that, Austin, I think what we will do is turn this over to you to explain our very famous widespread map of what we're going to clean up and what we're going to clean up.
Yeah, well, thank you, Michael. As Michael mentioned, this is what we refer to as the red-green map, but basically it's showing all of the legacy historical mining features present on the Stibnite site. Those shown in green fall within the footprint of the Stibnite Gold project, which would ultimately be addressed and cleaned up as part of the proposed mining operations. Those shown in red are legacy impacts and historical mining materials that fall outside the project footprint, and that's really what we're focusing on under the ASAOC. Some of these are addressed in early phases of the agreement, and some of them are on the table to be addressed in subsequent phases. Let's see, next slide here. Michael, I think this might be your bit to talk through here. I think we got a couple more slides with your name on it.
Austin, happy to take the baton. We got our deal in January 15th of 2021. Ultimately, as a part of our discussions and negotiations, we were able to bring in the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. We worked with the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, and the Nez Perce tribe was also consulted as a part of a government-to-government relationship that developed. The fundamental structure of this, of our proposal, is that over the next 4 years, as we mentioned, company's going to put in $7.5 million in time-critical removal actions. Year 5 is a bridge phase, and then for the remainder after year 5, for the remainder of the duration, which for just in terms of timing, is a 20-year AOC. The AOC contemplates that we will design non-time critical removal actions that can be conducted outside of the project footprint that we're mining. And thus, when Laurel was talking about the path to a comprehensive cleanup, ultimately, all of the red-green areas that Austin discussed will be treated, will be restored, and unlike any effort that and any fuller investment that we've seen thus far, there's the prospect of a permanent remedy for the stibnite site as a outcome of both the ASAOC and our company going into business and mining. But importantly, the AOC agreement itself is wholly separate from our plan of operations. They are complementary, but they are separate. So to the extent that early on with the announcement, there was some discussion about what the relationship would be for the cleanup versus the plan of operations and the NEPA analysis, we ultimately agreed with EPA that we would keep those two processes separate. Go to the next slide, Austin, Master and Commander here. So as we were talking about, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. It's early action over the next 4 years. Again, a long-term plan for site cleanup. We've made separate peace, at least for the first 4 years and possibly longer term, with respect to managing and confronting potentially responsible party or PRP liability. To the degree that this is, for all intents and purposes, an enforcement order that was negotiated, it's a voluntary agreement. It nonetheless contains $7.5 million in financial assurances, and then long-term monitoring. And again, as I touched on earlier, we agreed that this is not NEPA. It's not an analysis of the plan of operations per se, although we do expect that the projections of the future cleanup activity will be part and parcel of a cumulative effects analysis in NEPA, but nonetheless, they're two completely separate regulatory processes. Let's go to the next one, Austin. Austin, I think this may be the time for me to hand this over to you with respect to what we're going to be doing on the ground, if that works for you, Mr. Zinsser.
That's just fine. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, that was a great introduction. I'm going to be talking more about the specifics of what we're actually going to be doing under the agreement. But as Michael mentioned, the agreement is laid out into a couple phases. Phase one is already started. We're actively working to implement some of these site improvements currently. But they include 3 stream diversions to keep clean water away from legacy mining materials, removal of over 300,000 tons of legacy mine wastes from near the East Fork and Meadow Creek. We have various biological and wetlands assessment work to be done associated with the project. And then we're also going to be doing an adit study to inform subsequent work to address some of the adit discharges present on site. We have bonded for $7.5 million worth of work associated with this phase of the project, and we're working to complete all the work within that budget. The next phase is the bridge phase, and this is sort of an optional study phase in which Perpetua has the option to continue collecting data and evaluating remedial actions for some of the additional legacy mining areas located outside of the project footprint that could potentially be addressed in subsequent phases of the agreement. Such as some of the former oxide stockpiles and parts of the Bradley waste rock dumps that are not addressed in the first phase. The additional phases of the agreement will be occurring simultaneously with project operations should the Stibnite Gold project be permitted and go into construction as a mine. But these are the cleanup activities that would conceptually occur in these phases would involve basically are mining scale solutions. So we'd be employing the Stibnite Gold Project mining fleet to actually remove a lot of the legacy waste rock dumps that are present on the project site that are outside of the current project footprint, and be putting those into engineered facilities. Versus the actions, as we'll see in the first phase, are more limited in scope and are lower budget activities. So I'm going to be talking about more in detail about some of the restoration and reclamation activities that are going to be occurring under phase 1 of the AOC. We have 3 stream diversions, and then we have 3 waste removal activities. So this is a slide showing sort of existing conditions, showing the Northwest Bradley dumps, which are a major legacy mine dump comprising almost 5 million tons of materials. It's right next to the East Fork, the South Fork. Currently, Hennessey Creek flows down towards the Yellow Pine Pit, which is there in the background of the photo, and is diverted in a leaky ditch along the dumps. We believe that that leakage of the creek through the dumps is a major contributor to elevated metal concentrations present in the East Fork and South Fork. One of the actions that we're going to be taking in this area is going to be to basically improve the Hennessey Creek diversion, construction of a line channel, or possibly diverting it directly into the pit lake via a chute. And we believe that this is going to basically cut off seepage through these legacy dump materials and potentially lead to an improvement in water quality in the East Fork, South Fork of the Salmon River. This is also the site of one of the mass material excavations that is also included in the phase 1 activities, which will entail removal of mine waste material from basically from the floodplain and adjacent to the East Fork, South Fork. Another stream diversion is going to take place at an area known as DMEA, which stands for the Defense Minerals Exploration Agency. This was an adit driven for mineral exploration back in the 1950s with a government program targeting definition of strategic mineral reserves in the US, support the war efforts there. But currently the DMEA Creek flows down this drainage and interacts with this waste rock dump here, and we're going to be diverting the creek around the waste rock dump in either a pipe or a lined ditch to prevent interaction of clean water with these legacy mine waste. This is all sulfidic mine waste here. The third stream diversion included in the first phase of the ASAOC has to do with surface water from these unnamed tributaries, which flow down and interact with debris associated with the former mineral processing site in Meadow Creek. The wastes from the former mill and smelter were basically buried in this area in the photo as part of some of the 2000s era reclamation activities. But currently there's interaction of surface water and shallow groundwater with these waste materials, and it seeps out as tow seepage with elevated metal concentrations at the base of this feature. So we're going to be constructing another lined channel diversion in this area in order to basically keep clean water clean and prevent interaction of clean water on site with former mining materials. So I just talked about the 3 stream diversions that are part of phase 1. Phase 1 also includes 3 mining waste relocation activities. And basically these are going to be include relocation of approximately 100,000 tons of mine waste from the Bradley dumps, the toe of the Bradley dumps, into areas where it's outside of the area where it can interact with the East Fork, South Fork Salmon River. We're going to be removing an area of tailings from Lower Meadow Creek or the East Fork, and placing materials from that tailings removal on some former on-off heap leach pads left over from some of the prior mining activities in the 80s. We're also going to be removing some dumps from that occur along the East Fork, South Fork, and moving those also to the on-off pad. So I'll be talking about two of these in a little bit more detail in the next couple slides here. So this is an aerial photo on the lower left here showing the Meadow Creek as it occurred, as it looked in the mid 1940s during the sort of heyday of World War II era mining operations. But basically there were a number of tailings ponds present in this area. You could see some of them, one of them here in the foreground and one of them back in the background. But currently the Meadow Creek and the East Fork have incised through these tailings ponds, and there's the water quality in the reach there is significantly degraded, and it's assumed that is from the tailings ponds and the interaction there. And there's also potential for erosion of tailings materials into the stream. But the restoration activity that we're going to be implementing under the ASAOC as phase one basically is going to entail excavation of a wide floodplain along the East Fork here, and removal of approximately 25,000 tons of tailings materials from the floodplain and banks of the stream, and then restoration of the floodplain and restoration of the creek to basically increase floodplain connectivity and improve aquatic habitat in this area. So this is our one of our conceptual restoration areas, and one of the things that we're working through now in the design process is deciding whether it makes more sense to target Meadow Creek or the East Forks. We'll be doing one of these reaches here shown on this diagram. The bulk mass excavation associated with the phase one ASAOC is going to be removal of 200,000 tons of former mine dumps, which are known as the man camp dumps because they were the site of prior worker housing facilities on the site. But these cover approximately 10 acres. You can see that they're right next to the stream, and we're going to be removing 200,000 tons of this material and placing it into the on-off pads that were discussed previously. So you can see here's the dumps in this aerial photo. But we anticipate potentially getting to work on this project next summer, and we think that it's going to take a fleet of large articulated trucks and loaders to be able to efficiently remove this material. The materials from the tailings removal action and the camp dumps removal action will be placed in an on-site repository. It's going to be constructed on top of the former leach pads, and it's going to have basically be engineered to store approximately 150,000 cubic yards of materials, including the tailings and the tons from the camp dumps removal action. And it's going to have a minimum an 18-inch vegetated cover of clean fill material that will be procured on site from a borrow area. This is our sort of conceptual design for this at this point in the process, but we're in the middle of working through all of our designs with the U.S. Forest Service and the EPA. So the last aspect of the phase one ASAOC activities is basically the adit study. There's a number of adits with adit seepage on the property. And we're going to be basically doing engineering evaluation to assess, whether we'll be looking at, being able to cut off the water from these adits, or looking at passive treatment or potentially tank solutions. But we're basically going to be doing a study that's going to guide future remedial activities under the additional phases of the ASAOC. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael and Laurel to talk about financial assurance associated with the project.
So this was part and parcel of what we agreed to and is a standard component of administrative settlements and administrative orders on consent. To the extent that we had worked very closely with our insurer, McGriff, we didn't want the financial assurance necessarily to come at the end of the process. And so what you see here is a slide that discusses from the company and the insurer's perspective, some of the key considerations in negotiating this. So to the extent that, number one, we brought in our financial assurance firm early, took them through where we were in terms of the discussions and how the work that Austin has just described in the statement of work for our agreement was being negotiated and coming together, and what the cost of that was going to be. To the degree that our financial insurance lead at McGriff indicated that he appreciated our transparency with them in terms of the ebb and flow of the process. And by the way, financial assurance is not just necessarily confined in our space to just administrative settlements in a circular context. We are also seeing them, as Austin can attest to, on the project side. But we did learn that EPA has some fairly standard menu of options. We explored all of those: guarantee, surety bonds, cash bond, a letter of credit, and others. To the extent that we landed on a trust fund coupled with a surety bond, that was acceptable in our discussions with the regulators. To the extent that there was some flexibility in terms of as the work is performed, the prospect that we can work with our regulators and see if the full amount of financial assurance might be necessary in order to back up the investment that we're making. What we also learned is that we had the right size deal for the moment in time, and to the extent that we were afforded flexibility in terms of how to underwrite the financial assurance through the phases, given the particular triggering mechanisms for each phase, we were not, and nor would we, underwrite future work that A, has yet to be agreed to, or B, even designed. We can find the commitment that we made through the financial assurances to simply phase one that Austin talked about and took you through in terms of where we're going on the site to begin the cleanup actions. But I can tell you that there are moments where you have to have candid discussions with your insurance folks, and to the extent that we were advised, and I'll give our broker in particular, his name is Hardy Mitchell from McGriff, a lot of effort in trying to come up and think creatively and innovatively through what is really a one-of-a-kind ASAOC. We greatly appreciated the long-term partnership, and you got to be working with somebody you trust and ultimately somebody that you can have candid conversations with. And we were greatly appreciative of their help, because without the FA, we would not have completed the discussion successfully from both sides of the table. So Austin, that's going to be it on the FA piece. I don't know what additional slides we may have. Do we have anything else?
Yeah, I think, we, of course, go to questions and conversation here, but I believe that we're going to save questions on this for the end of of everybody's presentations and save them for after that.
Yeah, thank you. You guys thank you so much. You basically got us ahead of the game, and appreciate it. Sorry to all the participants for our slight hiccup. We are up to 91, so welcome to everybody. We can entertain a couple of questions, I think is what we decided, 1 or 2 questions right now, and then we will ask the rest of the participants to keep marinating on what Perpetua has presented here, which I thank them profusely. It's really an important discussion and an interesting concept they've been able to bring forward. Yes, ma'am.
We do have a couple of questions that came in on the Q&A.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and read them?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read them.
Thank you, Betty.
This is from Victor Rakin. How do you ensure that the legacy from the previous operations is fully documented to reduce your potential liabilities, including land disturbance, ARD, WQ, other? And then he has a second question, or a second comment. Even if you relocate the overburden disposal area from the direct contact with the stream, there is still a potential for ARD. Have you done any ARD assessment, and how is it being addressed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I could certainly handle the assessment bit. Then I'll turn it over to Michael to talk about the legal ramifications. But you know, on our site, we actually don't have an acid rock drainage issue. We have instead we have a neutral metal leaching issue. So we have you know sulfide hosted ores. We have pyrite and arsenopyrite. But what we also have is we have potassic alteration, which has manifested itself in presence of ubiquitous carbonate veining throughout the hydrothermally altered geological materials. So we've done quite a bit of acid-base accounting work and other geochemical characterization work as part of permitting the Stibnite Gold project through NEPA. And so far, we have no evidence of acid rock drainage issues occurring on site, and nor is there acidic conditions that have manifested themselves from some of the historical waste rock materials. You know, even after 60 years of exposure to the elements. So we feel pretty good about that. You know, there is regarding general impacts from historical mining activities. I think that. One thing that's widely known is the extent of impacts to surface and groundwater occurring on site. These have been documented in prior characterization studies on site and also documented as part of Perpetua's baseline data collection efforts. So I think that, yeah, I think that we're all, you know, have a good sense of what's out there, and we know that we think that the activities undertaken as part of the ASAOC are gonna help. They're not going to solve everything. Some of the solutions are going to require you know, mining scale solutions, and you know, there's over 10 million tons of legacy waste materials in Upper Meadow Creek, and these would be potentially they would be moved as part of the Stibnite Gold project, but moving those as part of the ASAOC is beyond the scope.
Let me fly in behind on just sort of the legal distinction between the CERCLA status that we have under this ASAOC and our potential future CERCLA liability, to the extent that maybe the questioner is asking, what will we become once we're in operation and we're disturbing legacy materials? The answer is that is not determined by this ASAOC. To the extent that the ASAOC recites an effort to maintain peace under CERCLA, if we are in business, particularly for legacy areas contemplated going offsite for phases 2 and 3, that is yet to be determined. To the extent that the agency could not tie the agencies, EPA and the Forest Service, can't tie their hands with respect to a complete deferral on CERCLA enforcement. That's just the law. Finally, to the extent that we have plans to, and Austin touched on this, there's a part of the site where we intend on reprocessing legacy tailings. We confront our own CERCLA liability with respect to how we behave during the plan of operations. But to the extent that those things that we have planned in addressing certain legacy areas of the site, we expect that they will be handled, managed, and stored on the site in compliance with what CERCLA would otherwise require in the National Contingency Plan.
Okay, thanks. There are a couple more questions. And the next one is from Tom Crawford. Will there be metal recovery from the mine wastes as part of the cleanup? I see a nod and a shake.
The short answer for the ASAOC, there will be no metal recovery. We're gonna relocate the material to an engineered facility where it's going to be high and dry. That's it. In fact, metals will probably never be recovered from that material because there's going to be a lot of organics mixed in with it. So we can't run that through any potential process plant that might get constructed as part of the Stibnite Gold project. regarding the Stibnite Gold project and relocation of the Bradley tailings, which are the millions of tons of tailings present in Meadow Creek. The plan for that would be to process it through the mill, but not really because it's profitable, but more because that's the best way to neutralize the materials and process them, oxidize the sulfide minerals that are present, and that material would go to the tailings storage facility where it could be safely managed.
Look, Austin, let me just come right in behind. We've got no authority to mine under the AOC. Short answer is, under the law, we've got no operating authority under the CERCLA enforcement order.
Okay, the next question then is from Ben Mundy. Are any of the waste dumps economically viable for processing?
That's a great question, and the short answer is we don't fully understand what's in those waste dumps. We think that some of them are probably could potentially be profitable, but we don't know what's in them. We don't have a reserve declared on any of those. We don't have any plans to process them at this point.
Okay, that's all the
Excellent.
questions. Ann, back to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Betty, for helping to field those. Again, big shout out to you guys. Thank you for your patience.